Continuing our look at the Canadian Football League leading up to the start of the season in a couple of weeks. I was going to say spring training. I guess technically that could be true still. But preseason games are underway already. And so I thought today we'll continue the preview by looking at the most talented teams in the CFL. A lot of times I do a top 5. That seems a bit excessive in a 9-team league. So we're going to go the top 3 most talented teams in the Canadian Football League right now. At 3, I have the Montreal Alouettes. You have to put the defending Grey Cup champions on here a little bit. But my only question around this team talent-wise was Cody Fajardo. After struggling with injuries and inconsistency in Saskatchewan, Fajardo came up with the playoffs of his life. And I do think there are times where you see someone do that in a championship or a championship atmosphere, whether it is the title game or the East Final or anything like that, and they get a bump out of it, and they just kind of stay at that level. Think of guys like Siakam and Fred VanVleet from the Toronto Raptors days. Think of, again, basketball, but like a KCP with his time with the Lakers and what he has been able to do now with the Denver Nuggets. Sometimes guys elevate and they just stay elevated. And I do wonder if we get that from Cody Fajardo. If he is that guy, then this is truly one of the most talented teams in the league. At 2, it's Toronto. They were the undisputed number 1 a year ago, but Chad Kelly has been just dreadful as a person. And he's not going to play for the first half of the season. And they lost a lot in free agency as well. So I still think this is a really, really talented team, but they have lost a bit of that high-end talent. And they're going to need some depth pieces now to step up in Toronto. But I still think because of the work they've done in free agencies past, this is still one of the most talented teams in the league. And at number 1, I have BC. I still love Vernon Adams. They lost a little bit in free agency, but no one really, I thought, took a real jump in free agency. Aside, like Ottawa, I think, had the best offseason, and they're not moving from 9 to 1 on this list. So I have BC with the weapons that they are able to throw out there on offense, with the strength of this defense as well. I just think that all over the football field, there is high-end talent, and so that's why I have the BC Lions as the most talented team in the Canadian Football League heading into the 2024 season. Okay, so yesterday we did the most talented teams in the CFL. Today we are doing the most overvalued teams in the Canadian Football League, and it starts with the Calgary Stampeders. Their over-under is at 7. This was a team that I don't think was very good a season ago, and I don't think they got better. And I think that the league kind of got better around them. So, I don't know. I don't know where all the wins are coming from for this team this season. I have said before, I don't trust the quarterback situation there. And again, some of the other pieces going around them haven't done that well. I was stalling there, obviously. This was a 6-win team last year. Where's the better coming from? It wasn't from free agency. They had a pretty good draft, but free agency, they didn't do anything. And you look around them, the teams that they finished ahead of in the standings, they beat Saskatchewan on the tiebreaker. Saskatchewan, I'm assuming, is going to have better quarterback health this year than number 1 and number 2 options, both going down with injury. And Edmonton has a significantly better quarterback situation than they had a season ago. So I don't know where 7 or 8 wins is coming from. Over means 8 and 10. That this, at no point does this team look like an 8 and 10 team to me. The second most overvalued team is the Hamilton Tiger Cats. The 5th best odds to win the Grey Cup at plus 800. I hate the quarterback situation. I think last year was kind of it for this team, and they didn't get anywhere close. I thought it was an uninspired group. Maybe coaching change is all you need, but I think the world of Orlando Steinauer as a football coach. And so I don't see where it's coming from with this Hamilton team. The Ticats finished at 8 and 10 a season ago. And so 5th best odds does put you technically in the back half, but still just 8 to 1 to win the Grey Cup. It feels high to me. For Hamilton. And at number 1, I have Winnipeg. They are plus 215 to win the Grey Cup right now. Very good team. Very deep team, obviously. But they have taken some hits. with retirements and free agents and whatnot. They're also kind of an aging football team. Should they be the favorites to win the Grey Cup? Maybe. Like you can make an argument. It's basically going to come down to, once again, who gets home field advantage in the West and who can come away with the win in the West final between them and BC. To in my opinion, to be the favorites anyway for the Grey Cup. We saw how that worked out last year with Montreal, but to be a 2-1 favorite to win the Grey Cup, even in a 9-team league, is just astounding to me. So Winnipeg, to me, is the most overvalued team in the Canadian Football League right now. The other day, we started our CFL previews looking at the most overvalued teams in the Canadian Football League. Today, we are doing the opposite. Who are some of the undervalued teams that you may want to invest in from a CFL standpoint? Going to begin out east with the Ottawa Redblacks. Their total is at 6. And I like the offseason they had. I think Drew Brown is an upgrade over the quarterback situation they had last year, especially after the injuries. I think Rhymes has the potential to be a real breakout star, and you add him to an okay receiving core out there in Ottawa anyway, and I think this offense does take a step forward. The offense wasn't the problem last year, though, and I will admit I don't know if they did enough defensively to really change. Like, I don't think this is going to be a comfortable over, but the defense can't be that bad again, can it? And B, I do think that the offense being a little bit more just a bit improved, I think, is going to help the defense out a little bit more in this as well. So I think Ottawa is really undervalued at 6. Same thing goes for Edmonton. Their total is at 6.5. They have a significantly improved quarterback situation from 1 year ago. No, I don't think a lot of Chris Jones as a football person, but they go out, they get Bethel Thompson, which I thought was a bit questionable, but there is no question he is better than Cornelius, and you still have Trey Ford there as a safety net. So I do think Edmonton steps up and gets over that total, and I think they're very undervalued this year. And I have to play the homer card. The last one here are the Saskatchewan Roughriders at 7.5. If Harris stays healthy last year, this team is a playoff team. They had injuries at the quarterback position, and they just fell apart. Now everyone had injuries at the quarterback position, but this one really, I think, affected Saskatchewan. You have a new coach. They went out and I think added a real identity to this team in this offseason. I think they upgraded in the secondary. You have a running game now that can help out if you do have to have another backup quarterback come in, and you still have, I think, a relatively strong receiver room. So I think Saskatchewan is going to be right there at the end, and I think that they are going to be hovering right around 500. So again, we're not blowing past 7.5, but I do think Saskatchewan is a little bit undervalued with a total coming in under 500. So that continues. That we're going to roll on with our CFL preview and look at coaches on the hot seat. And so with what I just said, both these coaches are on those teams. Obviously, it's not Corey Mace. So the first one is in Edmonton, and that's Chris Jones. He tends to wear out a welcome, Chris Jones. He tends to kind of be a little bit grating at times. So I think that he kind of needs this to start working if he's going to continue to be the type of guy that he is. And I think last year he significantly hindered this team by waiting so long to make that switch at quarterback. He has brought in a vet this year, and I think now there needs to be signs of a bit of a turnaround out with the Elks. The other one is in Ottawa, Bob Dice. This team hasn't made it to the playoffs since they lost in the Grey Cup in 2018, and really, they haven't been close. They have gone out, and again, as I mentioned before, addressed the quarterback situation. They have added to their receiving room. We'll see if the defense can turn it around, but this Ottawa team needs to show some signs of life to, I think, keep Bob Dice employed. Montreal wins the Grey Cup last year, but I don't think they were spectacular until a real good month got them a championship. Hamilton, I think, is just primed for a fall off this year. Ottawa needs to be able to be there to take advantage of that situation. And so if they don't, I do think it'll cost Bob Dice his job. We're going to continue the CFL previews leading up to opening day next week. Yesterday, we focused on coaches on the hot seat, but it's not just them. Players can be on the hot seat as well. So I'm looking at 3 quarterbacks today who could find themselves on a bit of a toastier seat going into this season. And the first one might be a bit of a surprise, but it's McLeod Bethel Thompson out in Edmonton. Yes, he just got there, but Ford was a fan favorite and a big part of a turnaround in Edmonton to whatever extent they turned things around. But Ford was a big part of what they did out in Edmonton, and if this is off to a slow start with the Elks this season, there's going to be a lot of questions about Chris Jones, and there's going to be a lot of questions about MBT. So we'll see if he can answer those this upcoming season. Bo Levi Mitchell in Hamilton. The first season was a disaster, as we predicted on the show. He called out the coaching staff for a lack of playing time in the playoffs. He has already been banged up. I think this is kind of last chance saloon for Bo Levi Mitchell. And Jake Meyer is the last, is the last one. This is not an organization that is used to this amount of losing. And this is, I think there are large sections of the fan base that are fed up with this particular quarterback. I know there are a lot of defenders out there as well, but he needs to figure this out. There needs to be, I think, a pretty substantial step forward for him to remain as the quarterback for the Calgary Stampeders going into next year. And that's going to be tricky because 2 receivers already went down with an injury. The CFL season is just a couple days away now, and it is now time to look at who could potentially break out this CFL season. 3 candidates that I think could have breakout years this year. We will start with Jalen Philpott in Calgary. His brother breaks out in the Grey Cup in a big time way, or else he probably, like for full season breakout, I think that he could be one, although we'll get to Montreal here in a second. Jalen Philpott, though, he has all the talent that his brother has. And I'm not just saying that because they're twins. That this is a very, very talented receiver and a player that a lot of people out here in Calgary were very surprised, or not very surprised, very excited about when the Calgary Stampeders made that draft pick. And so now would seem like a pretty good time for him to break out. Sorry, there you go, Shiloh. Now it seemed like a pretty good time for him to break out, as you have a receiving core that is, I think, in pretty drastic need of some help, given the injuries that they have had. You have a quarterback that this needs to be, I don't have him on here. If he is going to, A, stay the quarterback in Calgary, and B, if Calgary is going to do a fucking thing this year, he needs to be a breakout candidate. And so I do think there is going to be a little bit more focus on this and trying to get the passing game going. And I think Philpott is going to be a big part of that. I think he has the potential to be a real weapon for this Stampeders team moving forward. Out east, Drew Brown, quarterback for the Ottawa Redblacks. This one is, I think, a rather trendy pick. Shiloh back there is very excited about it. I don't know if the mic's picking that up. But Drew Brown is someone, he was the backup for a while out in Winnipeg and now is getting the opportunity to start. And I tend to think that sometimes the CFL overdoes it. Well, look, man, Nick Arbuckle was great. And a couple backup throws. He is going to be dynamite. What's that? He's on like his ninth team now? Okay. But I think this kid is legitimate. I think there is really something there with Drew Brown. And I have talked before about how much I liked Ottawa's offseason, going out and addressing the receiving room there. They still need some help on the defensive side of the ball, but I do think that they have gone out there and given Drew Brown a lot of tools to succeed. And so I think we have another quality starting CFL quarterback on our hands. And then lastly, we have Tyler Sneed. Sorry. Shiloh is all over the place right now in here. We have Tyler Sneed out in Montreal. Now, he did have over 700 receiving yards last year. So from a literal sense, he has probably already broken out. But I think from a national attention standpoint, coming into this year, it is Fajardo, it's Philpott, and that's kind of it. There isn't that focus on Sneed, I don't think, as much. And so this one is a bit more of a national spotlight breakout than it is a statistical one. Statistically, he had over 700 receiving yards last year. He's probably broken. But I think from a attention standpoint and from a respect standpoint, I think that this is going to be a player that gets a lot of that this season. So I think Sneed, for a Montreal offense that I'm really, really high on, has the potential to be a really big breakout. All right, the CFL season gets going on Thursday, and we are wrapping up the preview today. It is first CFL difference makers. These are guys that if they were traded to another team, immediate impact, or guys who have made an immediate impact on their squad as well. So we will start in Winnipeg, which looking at it, they have the most, which makes my Grey Cup pick a little bit later on a little questionable, but we'll figure that out later. The first difference maker is Zach Collaros. That's obvious. It's 3 years in a row that he's been voted the best player in the league. If that's not a difference maker, then we just shut this whole thing down right now. I do believe Brady Oliveira is a difference maker as well. Being Canadian and being that ratio buster of being an elite level player while also being Canadian in this league helps out. Also, he is just a gosh darn wrecking ball at the running back spot. Dalton Schoen, I think, is also a difference maker. He is a type of receiver that is so reliable and is someone that you really, really trust in big situations, whether it is in the red zone, whether it is second and long, or if you just need a big play. He can do all of those things. He immediately raises the level of any offense that he is in. And the last one offensively there is Stanley Bryant. Is he what he used to be? No, but I still think that his play on the offensive line makes a difference out in Winnipeg. On the defensive side, it's a couple of classics with Willie Jefferson and Adam Bighill. Both of them certainly come winding down, and Bighill dealing with some injury issues, but you put either of those guys on any team in the CFL, that defense automatically becomes better. Up next, the BC Lions. They only have a couple. On offense, it's Vernon Adams. I think that he is good enough that you put him in any offense and that offense gets elevated. Now, that is going to be tested in BC this season because they have lost a sneaky amount on the offensive side. So we will see what they are able to do, and this will be a real test of VA to see what level he actually gets to. And on the defensive side, I think defensive back Gary Peters is the type of defensive back that can make a difference on your team, and you feel good about him when you have him on the defense, which is, I mean, kind of an obvious statement, but you know what I mean. Out in Calgary, they actually have more than BC, but you will notice a trend. Micah Alway, Demario Houston, and Mike Rose, I think, are all difference makers. Alway, I think, is legitimately one of the best players in the league. Houston, I think, has a chance. Like, he has already kind of broken out, or not kind of. He has already broken out, but I do think that there might even be another level that he can get to defensively. And then Mike Rose, to put it very analytically, is just a gosh darn beast. So I think those three guys absolutely make a difference. The issue that Calgary has is they have but one difference maker on offense, and that would be Reggie Bagleton, who is just a stud as a wide receiver. Again, like Schoen, you trust him in all different sorts of situations. He is comfortable going deep. You can also get him on a couple of quick ones and put the ball in his hands and make him make plays. It helps out as well. I think offensively, he is really the thing that gets this team going. The problem is they just don't have enough on the offensive side out in Calgary. In Saskatchewan, I have three. Trevor Harris at quarterback. I think that became very apparent last season when he went down with an injury and this team went in the absolute tank. That one may be a bit more situational, and some of these are, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily just mean the best player in your position. Like, if you were to trade Vernon Adams to Winnipeg, he's probably backing up Zach Collaros. So, like, the stipulation for this exercise when it comes to quarterbacks is a little bit different. But I do think that his... God, this is going to sound so cliche, but his competitiveness, his desire to just like, hey, we're not losing today. I do think that makes a difference. And then he is so smart out on the field and recognizes different things defensively really, really well, and has a real feel and an understanding for the game that just elevates everyone on offense around him. I think AJ Ouellette is a difference maker at the running back spot. I think that he is one of those game-breaking type of guys that is so important in the CFL. When you're handing it off in a two-down league, essentially a two-down league. I think more teams should go for it on third down, but that's a different story for a different day. I think that Ouellette is someone that can bust off a 6, 7, 8-yard run, and now you're in 2nd and 2, and the entire offensive playbook opens up. He's someone that you can give it to on 2nd and 4 and still think you can get a first down. I really do think that he is a rising tide that lifts all ships. On the defensive side of the ball, it's Jameer Thurman. I picked him on 3 down as my defensive player of the year, and so obviously I think he can make a difference on this defense. Out in Edmonton, they have 3. First, it is Trey Ford at quarterback. Yes, the backup quarterback for the Edmonton Elks is a difference maker. You just watch what happened when he came in. There is no one like him in the Canadian Football League. Teams did not know what to do with him, which is why I think it is insanity that Edmonton went out and spent big money on a quarterback when they could have spent that money in other areas. But I think that Ford is someone who, like, he was coming along as a passer, and his legs and his scrambling ability and his athleticism make him an absolute weapon. Eugene Lewis is a difference maker as well. He improves every receiving room he is in. Another one that he is a safety blanket for your quarterbacks, and he doesn't need to be open, right? That's kind of the best way I can put it. And then Javon Leake as the kick returner. He's the only special teams guy I have on here. He is a real weapon for Edmonton that can shift fields. And especially when we get down to those ugly months here in Canada, he is someone that can really change a game very quickly in the old field position battles. Moving out east, Toronto. Chad Kelly, obviously. Not going to say much more on him. That situation continues to play out. I haven't had to say this one a whole lot. Faloran or Oromalade. There we go. Oromalade is just so studly on the defensive side. Him and Seresna are both guys on the defensive side of the football that are just absolute monsters and 100% beasts on the Toronto defensive side, along with Winton McManus, who is I remember watching a game against Calgary, and I was like, are there 8 of this guy? Because he is just everywhere. Always. Those 3 guys are game wreckers on the defensive side of the football. They're pronunciation records for podcasters like me who don't have to say their name a whole lot and just hear it and, oh yeah, I can make my mouth say those names. But they are absolute game breakers on the defensive side. Out in Montreal, Reggie Stubblefield, Darnell Sankey, and Marc-Antoine Dequoy are all, I think, difference makers. I think that, again, complete game wreckers. When you group them all together, it is a real force out there. And I just think that they all 3 of them individually and then together elevate any defense that they would be on in the CFL. Out in Hamilton, Tim White as a receiver, big play fellow, whatnot. He is someone who I do think, again, would just be not only a game breaker, but he is a difference maker, drive breaker, whatever you need. He is that guy. And then defensively, Jamal Peters, one of the best defensive players in the CFL. I don't think a whole lot more needs to be said about that. I have 2 out in Ottawa. Darius Pickett on the defensive side. He is such a smart defensive player. He is such a athletic defensive player, and he is someone who just ruins things for defenses. He didn't get enough credit last year because Ottawa's defense was one of the worst we've ever seen. And offensively, I do think they acquired one in Dominique Grimes. I think he is going to have another real breakout season, and I think he is going to be a key to unlocking a lot in this offense out in Ottawa. But let's update it now. Who are the best players in the Canadian Football League today? Coming in at number 10, it is AJ Ouellette. Again, just a bowling ball of a running back. He has proven now over a couple of years that it is legit. He can run with speed, he can run with power, just a very complete player. Again, we got the Toronto guys in Seresna and Oromalde. Man, I am really struggling saying that. I apologize, because these are 2 of the best players in the league. But together, both of them just absolutely ruin game plans on the offensive side. Tim White comes in at number 7 for me, one of the most talented wide receivers in the Canadian Football League, and someone who can just change a game like that. Dalton Schoen coming in at number 5. At number 6. He is the top wide receiver on this list, and for good reason. Just a do-it-all type of a receiver who has turned into such a reliable force out in Winnipeg. Also, get used to hearing Winnipeg names here. Not right now. Number 5, it is Winton McManus. I said in the breakdown of the difference makers that he is someone who, it feels like there's 8 of him out on a football field. His reads are tremendous. His athleticism and just the nastiness that he can play with as well makes him one of the best players in the league. I do have Willie Jefferson high at 4. I know the TSN one had him at 9, but I still think that this guy, with what he can do defensively, 11 sacks last year. Now, it is part of an overall bigger thing out in Winnipeg, but I can't quit Willie Jefferson. He might be a little bit on the older side now, but he is still damn good in my opinion. At 3, it is Brady Oliveira, the best running back in the Canadian Football League. His versatility is a real weapon, and I don't think it's just because he's been surrounded by a dynastic type team out in Winnipeg for the last little bit. I think he is legitimately that good. At 2, it's Vernon Adams, again, a guy who can do it all. Proved it last year that if he stays relatively healthy, he is as good as we thought he was. And number 1, quarterback who has absolutely found all of the potential that we were worried was wasted due to injury issues early in his career, Zach Collaros. Talk about a guy who can make every throw out on the football field. He has the athleticism and all of it. And it has all meshed together with that big old brain of his to end up coming out with some phenomenal plays and making him the best player in the CFL. But that race between Collaros, because all those things I just said about how we were worried about his wasted potential because of injuries, but he has now come out and combined the athleticism with a whole lot of smarts. You can say that about the two of them. We've just seen it more with Zach Collaros. So now we've broken down the individuals. Let's get into the team win totals for the upcoming season. I do this in every sport. It's just the CFL one. It's quicker. But now let's break down that this is basically just a division preview masked with gambling. In the CFL, we start at the bottom and work our way up. I think in last place, and this could be a bit of a surprise given the city I'm broadcasting from, I think in last place it's the Stampeders. I think losing the weapons they did offensively, even just in training camp here with the injuries, is a real hit. I think they have a very, very good defense, do not get me wrong, but I still think that they have lost too many pieces to be very competitive. I think the teams around them have gotten better, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think the biggest thing, I don't trust the quarterback. I have seen enough now of Calgary's mayor to just believe that this is not a quarterback that can lead this team anywhere that they want to go. So I don't buy the quarterback. I don't buy the weapons that he's throwing to. And I think the defense is very, very good, but not good enough to sustain with this offense playing that the way it does. So I have Calgary under 7 wins and in last place this year. The total for the Edmonton Elks is at 6.5. I'm going over. This team would have got over that last year if Chris Jones could have got out of his way and started Trey Ford earlier. Now they go with McLeod Bethel Thompson, but this is still an upgrade at the quarterback spot. I do worry about this team defensively. I still don't think they have enough difference makers, like we talked about it before. In the difference makers part of this, Edmonton didn't have any on the defensive side. I worry about this team defensively, but I think offensively, they have enough that they'll be able to get right around 500. I have Saskatchewan going over 7.5. I think they get over that easily last year if Trevor Harris stays healthy. Corey Mace, I think, sets a tone for this franchise and absolutely gets this team ready to go. And I think that they made enough additions on the defensive side of the ball to improve things that they'll be able to move into a playoff spot in the West. It does still feel like they're a guy short defensively to really make some noise, but to get to 500, absolutely 100%. In second place, I have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers coming in under 12.5 wins. And this isn't like, I don't think they go substantially under 12.5. I just don't see this being a 13-5 team this year. I think that they are going to have maybe a little bit less success against the BC Lions this year. I think that they have players that are aging, which like literally everyone does just based on how time works. But this is an old group that's getting older, and they have lost a couple of pieces along the way. And I think that's enough to just tick them a notch below BC. They're not falling out of anything. Like they are going to be very competitive throughout the season, but I just think they go a notch below BC, who obviously now is my number 1 team in the West. I have them over 11.5 wins. I am concerned with how much they've lost, to be completely frank. Because when you go through, it's like, well, sure seems like a lot of dudes who aren't there anymore who were really good last year. I think Vernon Adams is good enough to replace that. We saw last year was the year of quarterback injuries. If anything happens there, I mean, they're hooped. But you can say that about Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, Edmonton, Calgary. Toronto is dealing with it currently, not injury related, but you know what I mean. Like all these teams, if the quarterback gets hurt, like, yeah, it's not going to be ideal. So may as well just like predict along with everything anyway, because you can say that about every football team. I think the rest of it is still good enough to win the West and maybe beyond. Out east, in last place, I have the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So get ready for it, McMahon Stadium, coming up on Friday night. Two teams I predicted to finish last in their divisions, going head to head. I have Hamilton under 8.5. I don't think this is a good football team. Scott Milanovic is a good head coach, but Orlando Steinauer I thought was a good head coach, and he couldn't get this team much beyond 8.5. So I have them under. I think Bo Levi Mitchell is just cooked. I don't think they have real viable options behind him, and I think this offense gets worse and worse as the years go on. So all the way out on Hamilton, which means Ottawa getting in there over 6.5. I have said before, they had one of the best off seasons of any team in the CFL. They have now built a foundation. I wish more of that foundation included anyone defensively, because that was a real problem for them last year. But with Brown and with Rhymes, they have started something there, and I think this team is competitive in the Canadian Football League this year. I have them over 6.5. Up next is Toronto. I have them over 8.5. I think Dinwiddie is a good enough coach that he can get this team to 500 if Cameron Dukes is the quarterback for the entire season. Chad Kelly not being there for 9 games at least, just from a footballing standpoint, is absolutely not ideal. Obviously, there are some real-life things going on with that, and just deplorable real-life things going on with that. But from a footballing standpoint, I still think this team, while they have lost, again, quite a few pieces in free agency, I do think that they are a team that still has enough there, especially with those game breakers that we talked about on the defensive side. I think they're going to win games differently this year, but they're still going to win games. Sorry. I have Toronto over 8.5. And so in first place, I have Montreal over 10.5. I am really buying in on Montreal taking a step coming off of that Grey Cup. I think Cody Fajardo, he's not going to move into the elite. He's not going to crack this top 10. He might make the difference makers list next year. But Cody Fajardo is someone who I think now, gaining that confidence off of the proof of concept of winning the Grey Cup, even if it was just 3 good games, I think that, along with Jason Moss and this excellent defense, gets this team to first place in the West Division. And so my playoff predictions, I have in the West semifinal, Winnipeg beating Saskatchewan. In the East semifinal, I do have Toronto over Ottawa. West final, BC over Winnipeg. East final, Montreal over Toronto, so a little chalky based on everything I've predicted. And your Grey Cup champions for the 2024 season, the BC Lions. I have them beating the Montreal Alouettes. So those are my picks. What, though, am I most confident in clicking on? Let's find out. We're bringing it back. It is today's ticket. All right, a couple of these I got earlier on doing the CFL previews. Hamilton, I got them at under 8. The total's now 8.5, so we're feeling better about that. 8 wins doesn't get us a push anymore in the official prediction, but for what I clicked on, it's still 8. I have Calgary under 7 for all the reasons I just explained. Also, I think BC plus 450 is a good number to get them at as Grey Cup champions, so I pick the Lions as your Grey Cup winners. We also have a couple other notes for more immediately today. First, it is the Baltimore Orioles plus 100 over the Toronto Blue Jays. I know Barrios is pitching for the Jays. That doesn't seem to matter. This team is just not good enough to beat Baltimore. So I have the Orioles plus 100, and I have the Padres minus 1.5 over the LA Angels.